Hey, welcome everyone. This is Unfiltered Podcast. We are having real conversations about church planting. Raw, exactly what you see is what you get. But my name is Stephenson, and I have the joy and privilege of serving as the Executive Director of Church Planting for Converge, and we're also planting a church as well. So my co-host here.
I'm Danny Parmelee, and I oversee church planting in Converge Mid-America. And today we're going to talk a little bit about the church planter's wife and the role and what that is supposed to look like.
It's kind of a biggie conversation here, Danny.
So. And there's very specific things that a church planter's wife, right? They have
they got to play the piano. They got to, serve in children's ministry. Have to be a good cook. So no, we're kidding. But there are sometimes these, expectations that are very unrealistic, if we're honest, that can be placed upon our wives.
Yeah. And I would say it's funny that you mentioned those, because when I was dating Emily in college and told her that I was feeling called to ministry and called to be a church planter, she said that the things that she would not do is play piano and do tea and crumpet meetings with other wives within the church. And I said,
"What's she have against tea?"
Yeah. And so we actually we talked to another church planting wife, and one of the things that they said was really, really even helpful for her in the beginning, in saying one of the great things about planting a church is that you do get to design your role a bit.
Yes,
and
totally.
So instead of the pastor that we had before, his wife always did X, Y, and Z, and the pastor's wife having that kind of expectation put on them, that is one of the benefits. And it's actually something that I think even starts a bit during our assessment process. I know we did a whole podcast on assessment centers, but as an encouragement to the wives, we see a very broad spectrum, and I think that this is great. Everything from, we kind of say, co-pastor, so the wife is literally
very
co-pastor,
visible conversation,
very visible, maybe even preaching,
yeah.
To that extent, to wife of the pastor, so maybe a little bit more behind
more removed,
the scenes, and much more in kind of a supportive role. But how did it work? Our wives aren't here, so we kind of get to say whatever we want. We'll invite them on a later.
We will invite them as a follow-up to this podcast, so we can have a woman's perspective on kind of how they fit and how they saw their role, because I think they would lend a great part of this conversation. For us, it's probably a little different than the typical church planter's wife, if I'm honest. Melissa is, because her dad is a pastor, so she's a PK. She's grown up in the church watching her mom fill this role as being a pastor's wife. But not only was he just a pastor, he actually was a church planter that planted two churches as well. So she learned by osmosis, just because of her close proximity to the church plant understanding world. She understood, this is just what it takes. And early on, it takes a whole lot of extra work, time, energy, but it can be a huge blessing as well to the family. She still thinks very fondly and favorably to those years growing up in those churches. And one church that they started in a Italian restaurant, and she tells stories about after church they were filling salt shakers, for the restaurant owner when he opened up, the next morning, and so I that lends to itself a little different perspective than I think some wives may come to this conversation. But I think part of what it's okay to voice is helping your wife understand, what is she really actually called to do. Is she called to be your wife first and foremost? Is she called to love her family? Or is she called to plant? And so I think defining some of those specific roles is helpful early on in the conversation, even before you get to the pre-launch phase, before you even get to an assessment center. Have some hard sit-down conversations and really begin to define, hey, I think this is what God's calling us to do. How do you feel about it? What do you like about the local church? What do you have a hard time with the local church? And the more that you can be on the same page with those things, the easier it is to walk that pathway of planning a church.
Yeah. Yeah, I think for Emily and I, our situation was unique in the sense that we didn't have kids, and Emily had a career. Actually, she helped put me through seminary, so she said she got her PhD, the putting hubby through degree,
which means like she cut your hair, she packed your lunch, she did all those things,
and
right?
she still does. She still cuts my hair to this day, and we even have a story when we were in seminary that we were kind of low on money, so I gave her a haircut. That was the last time that she trusted me to do that, but those are the stories. Yeah. But she had a career, and so she was fairly invested in that, and so she was a little bit removed, kind of in the beginning. And then the interesting thing is that then when she wanted to get more involved in the church had grown to a place where all of a sudden it was like, oh my goodness, I don't know everything that's kind of going on, and so it is just one of those things. I think that it's constant communication with your spouse and checking in with them and how they feel, because the train can get rolling pretty fast, and you forget that you are also pastoring and ministering to them as well. And sometimes it can be easy to kind of either forget them on one side, or the other thing is it because they're your spouse that you over expect, and it's like, well, we're short a person. And there were those times. There were times where we were short in children's ministry, and Emily had to just kind of step in. But you have to be careful of that, because as soon as that kind of becomes the norm, you end up not only using people, but you're using your spouse to kind of move forward with things. So
yeah. How did you and Emily kind of navigate, and did it change where she served, her role in the local church from, your grand opening moment into years down the road? How did she see her role, and how did it shift?
Yeah, I think it changed for a couple of different reasons. Part was size of church, but part of it also was when she was working, and then the amount of time that she had then was less, and then we had Stella, so that allowed her to be able to
dynamic.
Yep. So it's like she had to focus on Stella, but at the same time, that allowed her to connect with moms that she could have never connected before with other moms. So that was actually huge. But during that time, the church grew a lot. So that was part of the time where all of a sudden it's like, oh man, where do I fit in this whole thing now? And then especially as we went to a multi-site model, not knowing which location and which friends she was supposed to still connect with, which women was she supposed to pour into. And I think that was a constant battle as the church kind of continued to grow. It was constantly asking, where do I fit in this whole picture? So, and I can't say that I did the best job with that either. It's kind of like, to me, I'm like, well, again, we're moving along and we're launching another site, or, I'm going to move my office from this campus to that campus. And I remember it was like, wait, you didn't discuss that with me. And I'm thinking, how does that affect you? It doesn't matter. Yeah. But it does with relationships and where she's going to worship on Sunday. Should she be following me around from campus to campus, or, some of those different things.
Yeah.
So
and just curious, like in your marriage, who's more extroverted, who's more introverted? How did that play into roles within the church as well?
Yeah, so I'm definitely the one that's more extroverted, and Emily is introverted. She would prefer to have a smaller group of ladies that she trusted and that she invested in. And for me, extroverted would rather be around crowds of people and an inch deep.
Yeah,
right. So type of thing. So, and even in our own personal friendships and how we had friendships or what we did on the weekends, that changed, because I'm looking at biggest opportunity to have social touches with as many people, and she would have preferred to just have, the same, 3 couples or whatever, kind of like hanging out. And so that was something that we even had to navigate, and I would say still navigate and try to figure out, kind of a rhythm for that.
Yeah.
How about you guys?
We're both fairly extroverted, and so Melissa loves to be around people as well. I think part of the challenge for us is realizing how to live in a pattern and a rhythm that's sustainable, because sometimes as extroverts, when you're both an extrovert, you can just go and go and go. And you both then all of a sudden realize like, I'm kind of tired of people right now. Like I do need to sit down and recharge, and we have to be careful. Our daughter specifically is more introverted. And so we just have to realize like she can't run relationally the same way the rest of us do. Our son loves it. Like he's always looking for the next party, wants to, where's the next group of people? And so he feeds off that energy. And so it's a weird dynamic in the home from us from that standpoint. Melissa really felt called in the last church plant to kind of fill in two roles. One was she just loved serving in the nursery, and she saw that as a time to disciple other women, because you're not preparing and teaching a lesson. She holding babies, it gave her an opportunity to minister to young moms that had never dropped a baby off in the nursery before and a little nervous. It gave her great opportunity to connect with the other women because they're just sitting and talking as they're holding babies and interacting. And so she really enjoyed the camaraderie and the discipleship opportunities that presented. And then as the church grew and the staff team grew, she really felt like God began to press on her a desire to minister to the staff wives and to give them an outlet and just engage them where they were at and just love on them, give them an ear. And so once a month, she'd actually gather all the staff wives together, and they go out and just have coffee for a couple hours and sit and talk. And she said that that was good for her, but she found that it was really helpful for all the women to be able to connect, because sometimes it can be a lonely place for any pastor's wife, whether or not it's the lead pastor or another supporting role, to find their fit. And I think it was helpful for them to be able to have a place to have those kind of healthy conversations. In this church plant, early on, Melissa's planning to kind of fill the new child check-in area. She's really good at connecting with people that have no real previous church experience, but helping them, feel like this is a safe place and even be excited about dropping their kids off. And so she just feels like that's a place that she can lend help to the church. But then she also wants to fill that role as the staff team develops and grows of connecting the wife and continue to do that.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I think for Emily too, as the church grew and there were staff, that was kind of her area that she just really enjoyed. And like you said, it's kind of that mutual, kind of encouraging type of relationship with other staff wives as well. I think for her too, one of the things is that she didn't have the expectation from other people, but sometimes felt like she wasn't doing enough. And I think that that's something for church planners to, again, just be keenly aware of what those perceived expectations. And for me, the support that she just gave to me and taking care of our daughters and running our household. And it may sound like old fashioned or whatever, but for me, that it really did give me this like peace and security and confidence that as I was doing ministry things at home, she was really had an eye on those types of things, and just so thankful for that. And she's at times thinking that I'm wanting her to do more and to, sing on the worship team or, do X, Y, and Z. And I really wasn't. And so I think that's something for planters to kind of just pay attention to and have those conversations.
No, that's great. And I tell the story this way, that Melissa, for us in our home, and it has been since, specifically kids changed the whole dynamic. She's the thermostat of our home, meaning she's in contact. She knows when things need to be cooled off and when things need to raise in temperature. And so she has the ability to control that and the rhythms of how our family operate. And so I've had to learn, I need to listen to her. When she realizes like we've just done too much ministry and we need to dial it back, we need to be at home, and this is good for us in our marriage. It's good for our kids, those type of things. I've got to pay attention to that and not continue to drive at a crazy pace. What are the conversations that you have, or how would you give advice, Danny, to a pastor who's going, I feel called to plant a church, but my wife doesn't want to do this? What kind of advice would you give them?
chocolate usually will change her mind on anything. No, I do think that God does call the couple, and so to be careful, I do think that there is a certain aspect where that's part of leadership, and if God's called you to plant a church, there will be a part where maybe you're even leading your wife in that, but to make sure that you're just not forcing it, and or that she's doing it begrudgingly. For Emily, when we were dating, as I was saying before, she wasn't excited about that, but it was also some misconceptions that she had. And there's a certain amount of fear, like how are we going to get paid? Like, is there going to be food for us and our children? And what happens if this doesn't work? And what if we move our family? So all of those different things, and to be patient with that, because even if God has called you, it may take some time for him to reveal himself to the wife as well too.
That's great. Great advice. This is just part one. We're going to continue this conversation with our wives actually at the table in part two. And thanks so much for joining us for unfiltered, real church planning conversations. Peace. Until next time, guys, keep it real.